Hi, it's Mark Bernard here with the Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity, and today I'm going to be talking about documentation. I'm going to be making the next 6 or 7 videos on some of the finer points that are not taught in most cybersecurity lessons or programs. So you can learn them here with me, and if you have questions, of course, you can always drop me a line or leave some comment at the bottom of the video. And don't forget to like the video and share the video if you found it useful. Okay, today we're talking about documentation. What's so important about documentation? Well, first of all, there are many different types of documentation. There's strategic or tactical type documentation that describes what the strategy is of your cybersecurity program. Of course, we have policies and we have practices and procedures, and I'll explain the difference between these. And guidelines. Guidelines are in red for a very specific reason that I'm going to tell you about. Standards and records. So let's go on and take a look here at what we have. So first of all, we start with a cybersecurity strategy. Now this is usually like a business plan actually. So it takes the strategic goals and objectives of the organization that you work for, and it writes how, within the business plan, describes how it is that you're going to be complying or supporting the strategic objectives of the organization. So you may have some goals or some specific objectives for your cybersecurity program, and those need to map and support the strategic plans of the organization that you work for. And then we go down another level, and we have some activities. So we may have a regular management system that we manage, which I'll be talking about as well. Or you may have a number of projects and a roadmap. So if you manage your program like a project, you have different activities going on like projects, then you have beginnings and endings, and then you have feedback loops, and then you start again, right? So the strategy sits on top, and it describes, things like the mission, the goals and the objectives. It has key performance indicators. It has critical success factors, all the kinds of things that will go into a business plan. And then, of course, as you map projects into that, you will have some kind of a budget as well that would be described as part of that. Now, in support of the strategy or the program, we have a number of policies. So we may have policies that address access control or backup systems, or maybe how we use human resource information, these types of policies that talk about the handling of information within the cybersecurity program. So policies are probably the highest level of control. They're generally approved by the governance committee, who manages the program from an enterprise or an executive level, providing a steering committee of sorts or governance. And the policies are very high level in nature. So there are things like employees will protect information, right? So they're not specific, because a specific policy is a policy that's not probably going to be used much. They're very general in nature, but they do address a particular type of risk. Now, below the policy, you may have practice documents. Practice documents are similar to procedures, which we'll talk about in a moment. But practice documents are high-level documents that describe the workflow, the goals, the inputs and the outputs of a process. But the one thing the practices don't have that procedures do is they don't have step-by-step instructions. Now, why is that so? Well, in a lot of organizations, you have highly skilled talent conducting cybersecurity operations. They're not usually green or new to the business, but you may have some new people who are brand new. But a lot of these people may also be graduates from cybersecurity programs, so they generally have a good idea of what it is that needs to be done. So they don't require step-by-step procedures. And a practice document is everything that a procedure has except for the step-by-step process. So it's usually a little bit lighter weight. It has some specific goals or some milestones that have to be achieved as part of conducting that practice. Now, if you do have a high turnover organization, or you're cross-training people from different departments to take advantage of a broader set of cybersecurity skills, you may actually create procedures. So one procedure I can think of specifically that is helpful is information handling procedure. So the information handling procedure is something that the cybersecurity professionals will teach the front office staff so that they know how to classify information and how to protect it and what type of security controls that go into those practices or procedures. Below the procedure, you'll have standards. Now, standards are a little bit different. So these are all separate documents. So policies could be combined into one policy like we do in ISO. We have an ISMS policy. So you have policy statements within the policy. Practices are usually individual documents. These are owned by different groups within the organization, within the enterprise. There's a manager, for instance, for information technology, who may own a number of practices and procedures, may also own some standards. Standards are very specific. So standards are things like what kind of encryption should I use for typical type of documentation, or what type of encryption would I use for communications over an open network or over a public network. So you might use SSL and TLS or something like that. Where you encrypt data on hard drives, you may use AES. And if you have wireless routers, you may use WPA2 or something like that. So there's different types of standards. You may also have other types of configuration standards for firewalls and servers and different types of infrastructure. You may also have hardening standards for laptops and mobile devices. There's a number of different types of standards that you have. These are treated as highly confidential. They are separate documents. It's never wise to bundle policies with practices and procedures or standards into one document, because the use and the application of these documents can vary quite a bit. Now, the one thing that we didn't discuss yet are guidelines. And guidelines are not generally used in an environment that considers itself to be secure. And the reason why is because there's a kind of a general rule about guidelines. They make things universally so accessible by somebody with actually no skill or no talent that it just literally dumbs down a process so much that anybody could execute it. And if that's true, and you have a secure process, and a teenager could pick up the book and actually execute it, then is it really secure? Probably not. So guidelines are kind of refrained on. But standards and records, of course, and we're going to talk about records next. So at every level within the practices and the procedures and the standards, and even the use of the policies, there's going to be records. So at the highest level, when you have a business plan, you're going to be reviewing that business plan with your governance committee, and you're going to be reviewing it with your management team, and there's going to be some records of that. Now, when decisions are made, usually that's when you want to keep the records, such as meeting minutes, for instance. You may also record information during a meeting, so it may not be a hard copy meeting for form of meeting minutes, but it might be an audio recorded one. Pardon me. The same with policies. So when you create policies and you draft them and you send them to the governance committee for approval, there'll be a record of that in the meeting minutes where they've approved it. When you record practices, practices get drafted and created, and at some point they get approved and published. And once these documents, the policies, practices, procedures, and standards get documented and approved, some of these will become what we call controlled documentation. And they'll go into a classification schema, into a document registry, and the master copies will be protected. So that the master copies, when they need to be changed, there'll be a check-in and a check-out approach. Similar to what we do with software code. When software code needs to be edited, we have a check-in and a check-out practice. When procedures get executed and practices get executed, there will be evidence of the execution of that process or that practice. And we're going to be talking about control points and control objectives in another mini video that I'll be doing here in the next hour, and sharing that with you on Vimeo. And it will talk about evidence specifically in the control points. But when you execute a procedure, for instance, usually there has to be some kind of approval, So for instance, if it's a change management procedure, there are changes made, might be to a system, could be to software. There's some kind of an owner who would approve of the changes. There would be some testing that would go on. Could be throughput testing, could be regression testing, could be functionality testing, could be a lot of different types of tests that would be would happen. Someone would review those. So these are all records of evidence that something has gone on. And those records, the important ones, especially where decisions are made, should be kept and maintained as evidence. The same applies to standards. When standards get updated, when you go from AES to AES2, for instance, for encryption, you want to be able to record when that happened. It's important, especially when you're doing a retrospective, you're looking back over changes that happen to an environment, which are very important to control the changes that go into an environment, just simply because you're trying to establish some level of resilience. And resilience means that you have stability within your environment. You can't really have stability unless you're managing your assets, cradle to grave, all the maintenance activities that go on and all the changes and configurations and stuff. Everything needs to be recorded somewhere. So usually there is a type of a service desk or something that records these changes and when they get assigned to teams and when they get actually completed. So all that information gets recorded somewhere. So this is documentation. Again, so there's strategy, which is like a business plan for the cybersecurity program. There's policies that address high-level risks and help to guide the staff on what it is they need to be doing. There's practices, which are basically high-level procedures without the step-by-steps. And then you have procedures where you probably have high turnover in your organization, and it's necessary to train people maybe on some custom activity that's unique to your organization and how you handle things. Guidelines are refrained on. They're not good for a secure environment because they simply just dumb down a procedure so much that somebody with no experience and no skill could execute it, which can be dangerous. And then there's standards, which basically set out the requirements for configurations. And then you have records that are kept as part of the activities that go on when you execute policies, practices, procedures, and standards. All right. I'm Mark Bernard, and this is the Bernard Institute for Cybersecurity Excellence. And you can find us on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. We're on social media generally. You can also go to the website if you want to check it out. We have some training. We're developing training on things like the NIST cybersecurity framework and on the implementation of ISO 27001 management system. You can email me, you could call me, or you can just leave some comments in the bottom of the video, and we will answer them promptly. And also, we want you to hit the like button, please, and share the video, because the more likes that we get and the more people that share the videos, obviously, it benefits more people. And that's really what the goal is. That's what part of the mission is of our new Bernard Institute, is to develop new knowledge around cybersecurity and share that knowledge with other cybersecurity professionals. And that's what we're doing. So thank you for your time, and look forward to seeing you on the next video. Make sure to come back and like and share the videos with your friends and your colleagues. Thank you.